Good evening. My name is Wesley Ray, and I'm recording this for an assignment for a higher education class with Grand Canyon. Don't want to take up too much time on the video. I will say that the nature of this assignment has me a little confused just because um, I'm creating a lesson plan for, an hour-long class or an hour and a half long class, but I'm presenting that lesson plan in a 2 to 5 minute video. So I haven't created the full lecture that I would give because then it's going to take longer than 2 to 5 minutes. But I will talk about how I would do this and how that would work in sort of an abridged slideshow, if you will. So not to take up too much time. And if I've misunderstood this assignment, please let me know. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. I will share my screen. Yep, you should be seeing what I'm seeing. And I'm going to begin from the beginning. So I've taken somewhat of an out of order step from the provided template, and I've started this off with my anticipatory set question, which is taking the form of a bell ring. Open notes, answer the following prompt. Says, write a description of a time when you felt like a body part was physically exhausted after some form of workout or exercise. Specifically, describe how that body part felt as you concluded that activity. Write a hypothesis or write a theory on what you believe was the cause of this sensation. My methodology here is that I don't necessarily want my biology questions, my biology content in a physiology class. I don't want my biology and physiology content to be limited to people who have studied a bunch of biology and physiology. I want your layman who has, run a shovel before to the point where his arms and his back are tired, or has thrown car tires around all day. I want people like that to be able to understand, oh, I know what he's talking about. It's that feeling whenever it hurts to lift my arm above my head after the end of a good arm day at the gym or anything like that. That sort of is what I'm getting at here. I want this to be something that can be approached by a broader audience. And that broader audience, when they get a question like this, they're going to all sort of tie into this based on their own interests because this is cross-disciplinary. Okay? Now, our daily goals. I have two main goals here that I want to address. I would be explaining the length-tension relationship of muscle, the idea that as I contract a muscle and make it shorter, it gets tighter, but I can also stretch it out and make it longer, but it gets tighter. And then somewhere in the middle there's a point of relaxation. I also would need to explain the functions of actin and myosin filaments and muscle contractions. That's because the majority of what this would be about would be muscle contractions, the theory of cross-bridging. And I would begin the lecture of cross-bridging, and I would talk about in processes and with graphical representations for those people who are more pictorially inclined or visually inclined. I would talk about the process of action potentials triggering the release of calcium ions from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and I can talk about how those calcium ions change the conformation of troponin and expose active sites that allow myosin and actin to bond to one another and cause cross-bridging. I could talk about the dissociations caused by ATP. I could talk about all of that stuff. I am not going to get into that here because I am so limited on time. And my understanding of the assignment is that I'm talking more about my plan than giving the actual lecture. Okay? Which again, I may be off mark and I apologize if I am. I'm taking my best guess here. Okay? After lecture, I have 3 questions here that would be simple progress checks. This is designed to be a formative assignment. I'm not grading something like this. This is not a quiz. I would ask the class to answer these in their notes. Okay? Why do actin and myosin only bind to each other sometimes? What stops them from being constantly bound to one another? Well, because troponin filaments are activated by calcium ions. Troponin is in the way and covers up the binding sites on actin. And if it wasn't covering up those sites, then these things would always be bound. But because the sites are covered, You can control when you do and when you do not have these contracted. What bodily mechanism starts the release of calcium and therefore starts a muscle contraction? I want them to understand that action potentials are what start a muscle contraction. And what are two ways to increase the tension on skeletal muscle fiber? Well, to contract it or stretch it. Okay. This is not something where I'm grading it. This is purely formative. They are writing an answer that they think is correct, and then I may either affirm their choice of answer or correct their choice of answer. Differentiation strategies for this. This presentation can be made available online. I do this in most of my classes today. I would continue doing it in a setting like this, where my slideshow and a recorded version of the lecture itself separately would be available online. That slideshow functions not unlike a note handout that you might give to all of your students in class. And the recorded lecture allows asynchronous people, people who are not actually in seat, people who have a working life of their own and can't make it to every class, people who've got two kids at home. Okay, those people don't have to miss out on the educational experience just because college has classes that happen at certain times. Also, recorded lectures can be subtitled. This is subtitled in English, but I could just as easily change the language of subtitle. And if I had somebody in my class who was an English language learner or just somebody who didn't speak English at all or didn't know English, I could change my subtitles to where they can understand what's going on. If not through my spoken language, through subtitled language. Okay, I addressed the asynchronous lectures. And I would use examples and methods that don't rely on a heavy biology background. A lot like what I'm talking about at the beginning. Everybody knows what it's like to have a muscle that is exhausted. And using that as a, hey, if you follow along today, you're going to understand what that means and how that works. That's going to be enticing to the people who are curious enough to learn this in the first place. Okay. And then I would get to my closer. And my closer is another everyday, relatable activity where you do a wall sit exercise. And anybody who's ever done a wall sit, now this would only be for those able-bodied students. But anybody who's done a wall sit knows that feeling in their legs after, a minute or so of this. And being able to explain what that feeling is really going to drive that point home. Being able to feel biological concepts that we're discussing in class, that the muscles in the legs have used up their oxygen supply, have switched to anaerobic pathways, and are starved of oxygen and are creating lactic acid. Being able to explain stuff like that is going to drive the point home. You want somebody to remember how all that stuff works, let them feel it. And they will know how that stuff works. They will not forget that anytime soon. So, and there is that. I am going to escape from that. I will stop screen sharing. The recording should be back to me. That's what I've got. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. But aside from that, have a good rest of your evening.